Hey everybody, what's going on? Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Hope Santa was good to you this year. If not, maybe you can get online and buy something you want for yourself. But I promised this video of how I built the Toyan monster truck. It was a simple build. It was basically a bunch of RC junk box stuff that I had laying around. And I know we all have broken stuff and things that we're not going to do nothing with, and stuff that we find at yard sales, things like that. For instance, I bought this Kyosho Mad Force frame, a roller slider. It had the axles. It did have the nitro engine, but I could not get this thing fired up at all. I don't know if the carb just gummed up or what, but it wanted to fire, I spent about maybe 45 minutes on it and said, you know what? I got that Toyan V8. I think I'm just going to throw it in here, And it was like I say, you can buy a roller or a slider online of a monster truck for a couple $100. And yeah, you don't know what you're getting. Sometimes they've lived a rough life. They're beat pretty hard. This one here, like I say, I don't know what condition the ring and pinions are and the axles, but from the rest of the looks of the truck, it wasn't hammered too hard. It looked like it was more, it looks like they lowered it and had some fun with it. So we're going to get into the build today. This body, I don't even know what it is. I think it might be a New Bright, one of those super cheap, plastic framed, RC trucks from like the 2000s, maybe late 90s, I don't know. But it was, a guy at work had the thing in his shed, and he goes, can you do something with this? And I said, yeah. And I've had this body on my Bruiser too, the nitro version and the high-powered brushless version. So, but like I say, it was just you'll see brackets on here that are, for your 2x4 structures. I got those at a hardware store. You'll see a cable on here. This come off a Volkswagen to open the door. It's a door pull cable. You go to your local junkyards, pick and pull, whatever, and you walk by a car and you see the cable's exposed because the door panel's off. Grab it and see what they want for it. You can buy the Airline cables, and you have to make everything yourself. Got to buy the ends, all that stuff. I just had a Dubro collar, put that on the end of this. The other side, I pretty much used a electrical crimp fitting for your automotive things, and I just screwed it to the carburetor. So we'll get to that when I pull the body off. Now the thing is, I screwed the body on here because I was in such a hurry. Normally what I would do, I would hinge it somehow so it hinges, front or back. Or I would, instead of screws, I would use the HGP 407 body mounts that are metal. They screw in, they got a hole like a pin. You can put your body clip right on them. And I've used them, I didn't have any left because I've used them for all my RC hoods and things like that. I use them as hood pins. Just put a piece of small wire on them. And, for like 5th scale, 6th scale, quarter scale even, it works good for hood pins. Just depends on how big of a clip you get. So I don't have any of those. I'm gonna have to order some of them, order a couple more things. And but let's get the body off this thing, and I'll go over how quick this thing was to build. You're gonna see zip ties, you're gonna see screws, just minor things. There were some things I did have to buy for it, and I'll go over like hoses. I bought a hardware kit, with 3 and 4 millimeter lock nuts and screws and all that stuff. And but like I say, let's get to it now. So I'll tear it apart and pop the body off because it's not quick. You got to unscrew it, you know, for now. So hang tight. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Pull this body off. You see I hacked up the plastic frame and all this stuff in there, and I think this thing was black and I painted it red, but I opened up, this is all plastic, you know what I mean, which is nice because it's strong and lightweight, and it's a hard body, which I like. So you're going to see a lot of odd placement of things on here. For instance, the fuel tank, it's up in the middle of nowhere in the cab, and I had anticipated on putting it off to the side, and I thought, I don't even know if this thing's gonna work. You know what I mean? This is how you learn. So I just rigged it together and said, hey, you know what, I'll put zip ties here and there. You'll see zip ties all over the place. I mean, you know, for wiring looms, things like that. I did squeeze the battery in here on top of the steering servo. I had a flat pack, 11.1 volt. These work nice for running your electronics for your radio and your ignition systems. I stuck the ignition box right here. Now, no, this is the front of the truck, so you know, if you guys are familiar with a lot of the Nitro RC cars, the engine's set in the back. Now, I was going to put that engine in the front, and I thought, I don't know, you know, monster trucks, you know, it had these zoomy headers, and I thought, what do you, I mean, they're in the way if you're going to build it, something with a body on it. And so what I basically did was switch the headers around from one side to the other, so they point, this would be your front of the engine, they point that way, so it's the back. And I used engine brackets that came with it. I just took them from the outside and turned them around, put them on the inside, and I took a flat piece of aluminum. It's like 1/8 inch. It's like a welding coupon, you know. It's, I don't know exactly what the sizes are. They're small. You can buy boxes of them online. So I've had, you know, a ton of those, and I just laid it down, shimmed up the washers underneath it in the back, and moved this, what do you want to call it, this aluminum rod here was actually up higher. So what I did was I moved it back a little bit, just switched holes around on the chassis. So when you do that, it kind of gives you room to like fit things. And I got the the 3-speed clutch on here. Let me move all this here and get you guys a little closer to it. So all I did was I set it on here, tried to keep the motor as level as I could on the build, and got it to where I shimmed up the clutch. Get it over here this way so you guys can see it. So I shimmed up the engine to where I had a nice mesh on my clutch and gears. Now this is a 3-speed, and if anybody's familiar with these things, because I have one of these down in my basement I bought, and I think I ran it like 4 times, but the reason it has wheelie bars on it is because it needs it with a nitro engine. So I don't know if this thing's going to be pulling any wheelies or not, but you know, it's going to be it sounds pretty wicked. It seems like it's got a lot of low end torque with this engine, and the RPM helps. So I basically put the carburetor on, I took the big finger lever off, and there's a big Phillips head screw. Took that out and used a wiring crimp with the circular one, put it on there, crimped it to my cable. Now, a lesson: if you're going to go to the junkyard and get these cables, make sure on the ends, wherever you're going to cut the cable, okay, like, so this cable is normally about 3 feet long, so I cut it down. So basically what you do is you pull the cable out as far as you can, because you want to trim down the outer casing. And now these have a steel swirl liner in them, and then it's got a plastic one inside that, plus it's got this outside coating of plastic, so it's good and protected, and it gives it a you know, a smooth, you know, pull and everything. It doesn't stick with those kinds. There's some that have a solid metal wire in here, and the cable ones, and sometimes the solid metal ones are good too if you're not going to do a sharp bend. Like this here has got a pretty severe bend here and here, and so, you know, pull the cable out as far as you can and solder it, then cut it right in the middle of your solder. That way there it doesn't fray, and you can put it back into the jacket. That's a simple thing, you know. So like I say, the stuff that I had to buy for this was some hose, you know, the silicone hose, so I could extend my radiator out. Trying to think what else. It was the hose clamps. I bought the correct pinch style, like lawnmower hose clamps. For your all my cooling. And in the front, on the engine itself, they got the ones that are already connected on here, and you just tighten them up, and which is cool. But from there, I had to put Ys on these things so I could run them into one radiator, because there's 2 in and 2 out, so you got to meet them together somehow. And in one of my last videos, I showed you can buy those vacuum tees. I bought like an assortment of them. I bought an assortment of like compression springs and pull springs, and then I bought a complete assortment of the hose clamps, the wire hose clamps, and like I say, I got it on there, kind of got it where I wanted it, shimmed it up where I wanted it, marked it. So the engine basically sets on this chassis, on this plate. Okay, there's 4mm bolts on the legs of the kit bracket that comes with the Toyan engine. Turn them around, I drilled holes and put 4mm lock nuts and screws in them, and then I got 1 3mm in the front, or the back I should say, through that little rod that I moved. And then I got 2 longer 4mm with lock nuts going down through the holes in the washers, so it ain't gonna move, you know. So this thing, you can twist it and everything else, and it's pretty rock solid, and the gear mesh stays the same, you know, because that's another problem that I had run into on the HGP 407s when you're putting in like the Revo 3-speed gearbox in your HGP 407s, you know, because this is like, I think I started this trend a long time ago. It's a 2-speed with a reverse, it's got a brake, you know, and you can change your input gear. But the problem I was having on the 407s was the flex in the frame. It would separate the gear mesh, and at the time, you know, we're running a bigger plastic Revo gear on there, and it just wiped that gear out with those little you know, L200s even, you know, the 2-cylinder ones. So anyways, like I say, I mounted the engine and I got that there, and then I just started building components from there out. I moved the steering and brake servo to the outside of the frame, so it still does the function of the steering, or not the steering, but the brake and throttle servo. So it still does your throttle one way and your brake the other. I just moved it over and extended the, you know, the metal wire there a little bit, and the steering servo sets in its exact place. Because my first thought when I was going to get a T-Max or a T-Max chassis plate, you can buy them things all over the place cheap, and the transmission, it's already cut out for it, and you can set this gearbox right down in there, and I was just going to cut a square around it and mount it to this existing square that's in here and eliminate that one. And but the problem was the steering servo has a turnbuckle back here, and it's you know, it got really complicated. So as far as the shock towers, I just turned them around from this side to that side, and then put little U-bends in the things here, so you know it clears the headers, you know, which is cool. And this is I mean, it's a nice high revving little engine, you know. The only problems I've had so far with this engine was, one was trying to set the carburetor when I first got it, and two, the distributor still does a bunch of sparking. Now I did notice if I move my hall sensor just a little bit one way or the other, it changes the position of the timing in here, and it fires dead on. And you can see a lot of the external sparking to the case goes away. But the problem is, that's why I got this zip tie on here. And you're going to see I got a piece of like vacuum hose over my my CDI trigger cable here, just to hold off any interference, you know, to the ignition or the radio. I just cut it, slipped it over the thing, and it's to protect it too, because I got it back here by the belts, you know, for the water pump, and zip tied it in, and that seems to work good too. But you know, I was just kind of messing with it. We got about, I don't know, maybe 3 inches of snow outside, and it's really cold. So I did want to take it out today and give it a test run. I've tested it on the table, and it crawls right out of my hand when I'm trying to hold the wheels, and I gun it, and it wants to pull up and twist my hand out of the way. So apparently that little stock Kyosho clutch, you know, I bolted right to the flywheel, is working fine, you know. So I mean, it's a Teflon clutch. I wish it was a aluminum one. I do have some aluminum ones, but like I say, when I threw this thing together, I was just I didn't even know if it was going to work. But you know, so far so good. And the front, you'll see, you know, I basically zip tied the radiator to the front body post in the front, set it on top of the existing front bumper, and I threw all my electronics in here except for my CDI. I kept the CDI over here, and I put the receiver and speed controller in the box here, and I just double stick taped the switch out here so I can turn it on or off this way. And to run my CDI unit, you kind of got to plug in the battery. But other than that, it's still the chain drive, 3-speed. The only thing is, it don't have a reverse. I wish it had a reverse, you know. But if it works out, you know, maybe I'll come up with something different on the next build. But you know, but like I say, for your cost of your engine and a slider and a bunch of junk that you got laying around, if you already have a slider and you buy an engine, you know, it's just, the mind's a terrible thing to waste, you know what I'm saying? Just sit down and think about it and start setting it around, move it, shim it up with stuff, you know, rolls of tape or you know, anything you got laying around, try to see where you got to be. And me, I looked in my scrap junk box and said, hey, I got these washers. You know, they were actually off a Mercedes-Benz front bumper. They're really thick washers. And I think they're like a 13 or 14 millimeter hole in the center. And I had 4 of them. I just stacked them 2 on each side and drilled through them and pinched them together with, like say, 4 millimeter long screws that I got in that assortment kit. But, and, you know, so far the shocks, I'm surprised for all the weight that I have on the back here. You know, moving the shocks around, they are adjustable on here, but it's still kind of, it gives it that sloppy monster truck shake, you know. You know, maybe they'll fail when I take it out and run it. I don't know. But anyways, like I say, guys, that's the build. You know, and I plan on getting this out and running it because this engine revs like crazy. I mean, for the money, I'm going to do a video on that next, you know. But I mean, I know they got a bad rap. Okay, Toyan had a bad rap because of their addressing their L400 crankshafts, and you know, and some of the other engines had some, you know, sketchy problems, and but you can't blame Sterling Kit for those problems. So Sterling Kit is the middleman that brings them to you, you know, and Sterling Kit, sometimes they do develop engines, you know, and then these other engine manufacturers make them, then they put them together. But the Toyan engine, so far that I know of, was the brainchild of Toyan engine, and I think Mr. Lee. If you notice, the big 277cc V8 is the exact copy of this. So I think everybody worked together on this, despite the rumors that you've heard out there, because I've got my inside direct, no crap, you know, no lies information. So I don't get caught up in the drama. You know, a lot of people throw me under the bus for getting a Toyan engine. But you know what? They're inexpensive, and they're a hobby engine. They're fun. They're not your Honda engine where you got to rely on it to get to work every day in all kinds of weather. It's a hobby engine. I mean, I've spent just as much time with a nitro engine, you know, trying to fix the idiosyncrasies of the carburetors and, you know, the compression problems and the clutch problems as I have on these. So, give or take either way, you know, it's still a hobby. So, but if you want something cool, grab the Toyan V8, because I was really impressed with this engine. I really was. I mean, for, you know, what the first one was like, and that's the thing, you know, when the first one comes out, it's an experiment, you know. I mean, nobody knows what they're doing, but we're gonna, you know, at least they gave us the opportunity to fail, okay? Because sitting there on the drawing board on paper isn't doing nobody any good. Okay, I got mine. It ran great. I blew it up, actually. I revved that thing, I think about 12,000 RPMs and rod let go. And man, did it destroy that inside there. You know what? I called them, or not called them up, I emailed them and I said, I need 8 rods, 8 pistons. I need a new crankshaft. And the cylinder block, I was going to get a new one because it was all scarred up, but I just kind of dremeled out all the rough spots, and I put that engine back together, and it still runs to this day. It's in my Camaro build. So, you know. But like I say, it keeps you busy, keeps you occupied. You have something that nobody else has when you're done, you know. So, you know, a lot of older guys, you know, their friends come over and they kind of look at you funny because you're in, oh, it's an RC car. They're thinking it's the little, you know, 9.6 volt, you know, new bright thing that they bought their kid, and until they see the V8, and then they crap their pants, you know. So, you know, this is the hobby that I dreamed of back in 1982 when I first got my Bruiser. I first thought, wow, gas engine in this thing. I tried these. I've done it, and more scale came along, you know, and so with the RC four-wheel drive chassis and stuff, I did the L200s, and you know, they're just, like I say, the ideas are endless. So put one to use, mess around. Even if it takes you 5 years to finish it, it took you 5 years to finish it. You know what I mean? At least you did something. And a lot of keyboard warriors out there are like, oh, they gonna do this and they gonna do that. I don't know how they could give you that information out of just an idea in their head. I know we have all went through the same problems of handling and suspension and all this stuff, but who puts a V8 in something that's that heavy and says, hey, you know, that ain't gonna work, you know, when they've never done it, you know what I mean? So at least I'm out there, you know, cutting the weeds down to make a path for everybody else to come through, and I show you guys exactly how simple it is to do or how complicated it can be, and we have something cool. So I don't want to go on about the build without firing up for you guys, because that's a reward of building something. So we're going to fire this thing up right here, even though I can't take it outside. So I show you it's pretty quick. You just hook up the battery, the fan comes on, the ignition's on, and I always use these cheap radios just because they're good for experimentation, and you can still use them all the time. And 1, 2, 3. There we go. Now she's ready to start. Now I put the speed control in here and just hooked it directly to the starter motor, and I put it on channel 3. So you can. He's a little cold. I don't want to stink my house up too bad. So, but there you go, guys. You know, the mind's endless. You can do something. This is like probably one of my happier builds. You know, I've done quite a few scratch builds with these engines, and like I say, sometimes I amaze myself, and sometimes I feel like giving up, but I don't, because when you start it up and it wants to claw out of your hand and go off the table, you can only imagine in your head what it'll be like once you wind it up. Now the problem is I'm going to have to pull the 3-speed apart to adjust the clutches, which is going to be a pain, because the your Revo gearbox, you just open this up and you can adjust your second gear shift in here. And being nitro engines rev twice as high and these rev half as much, I'm going to have to back that spring tension way off on its shifting. So but like I say, like, share, subscribe if you want. Merry Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year. I hope you guys enjoy your holidays, which one you celebrate. And like I say, I hope you, you know, if you didn't get that gift you wanted because you're being super dad and you're making sure everybody else is taken care of, you know, I hope you get one for yourself. So, all right, man. Loved all. I'll catch you later. Adios.